What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rollup YouTube channel. Today we are talking about a very important space right now happening in DeFi and in blockchain applications in general. This is the aspect of delegated governance, which rings true to DAOs all over. Um, it's not one of the financial applications that I think a lot of DeFi power users are looking for. We're not going to talk about massive APYs. We're not going to talk about just how to leverage to the gills. But this is just as important of a topic because it squeezes more value for you as the token holder. So we're going to be talking about delegation in general, how DAOs are using delegation to further their community, how token holders can contribute to their DAOs that they're a part of by delegating. And we're going to take you through all the exciting stuff that's happening this week for Delegation Week, brought to you by Tally. We've got Adrian from the Tally team, and we've also got Fig and Avi from the Flipside team that is going to bring us the perspective of a delegate. So thanks, guys, for joining. It's a pleasure to have you guys on. Adrian, why don't you take it away and show us the Delegation Week UI?
Yeah, sounds great. So I've got a quick demo here from two perspectives. In this case, you can see I'm signed in as Fubar, who is a delegate. And then later, I'll show the perspective from this address, 0xD, who is delegating to a delegate. So we'll start with Fubar. If you go to your DAOs page, you'll see the DAO you expect with proposals and information on the voting power and all that. But at the top, there's this clear information about Delegation Week. So if we click that button, we'll go to the home base for delegation and specifically for Delegation Week. And on the first tab here, we see delegated to. So here I see I have 10,000 tokens and I'm delegated to myself, but my total voting power is 100,000. So it must be because other people are also delegating to me. So that's what's on this other tab. If I go to received delegations, I see the incoming delegations, right? I see myself, those 10,000, as well as 3 other addresses and totaling 100,000 voting power. And on the left, you also see your statement, whether or not you're seeking delegations, and then a summary of that statement. You can go into edit that statement, say whether or not you're seeking delegations at this time. You can write your full statement, why people should delegate to you, what they can expect from you. A summary of your statement, this just like shows up in the preview cards. And then issues, which help potential delegators find aligned delegates by choosing something that they want to filter by and find somebody that also cares about that issue. So if we save that, we're back at this UI, and if you click View Profile here, you'll see all that same information, but this is the public page where if you're a delegate, you want to campaign for additional voting power, you would copy this URL and you would share this on Twitter, Discord, or wherever your community lives to help share your profile. They can see your performance and then hopefully consider delegating to you. So that's the experience as a delegate, right? And if we switch over here to 0xD, we see the same thing, except now this is the perspective of a token holder. So we'll click that same button. We go to My Voting Power. And on the Delegated To tab, we see it looks slightly different. I own 88,000 tokens, and I'm delegated to Fubar, who we were just looking at, who has 100,000 total voting power. And this is just a test DAO, so we don't see performance here, but in a normal DAO, we'd see something closer to this, where you can also see a summary of their participation. In this case, they've have a 43% participation, which is maybe that's low. And maybe we give you a heads up saying that they've missed some key votes, so maybe you want to consider redelegating. And in that case that you do want to update your delegation, maybe you delegated a year ago and it's time to consider other delegates, you can explore all delegates. And here you see a list of all the delegates in the DAO. You can filter by who's specifically seeking delegations, who's intentionally seeking delegations. And you'll also be able to filter by issues here to find someone who's aligned. That'll be in here by next week. And then eventually find the right person that you want to delegate to and submit that. And the last thing I'll show here is, this is just the experience for one DAO, a Dave DAO in particular, but some holders are participating in many DAOs. So if you click in this menu option up here, Your DAOs, you can see a list of all the DAOs that you're participating And then if you click review on any of these DAOs, you will go into that same UI that we're just looking at, but for that specific DAO. And that's about it.
Awesome. Yeah, so the idea behind Delegation Week is to increase awareness of delegates in general. And there's some really nice incentives that are getting passed around. Um, ENS, Gitcoin, a bunch of other protocols are leveraging free delegations, right? So they're sponsoring a bunch of gas costs, somewhere between like 1 to 3 ETH for most of these projects, in gas cost subsidies, so that any token holder can delegate during delegation week. But once those incentives run out, you're going to be paying 30, 50, $100 depending on gas cost to delegate. So, we're really trying to spread the word about why delegation is so important. I think Fig and Avi, you guys, you've been delegates in several DAOs as part of Flipside governance. From your perspective, why is delegation so important?
Fig, take it away.
Sure, just figuring out how to unmute here. Delegation is a great way to actually inspire ownership within crypto. Ownership has been touted as a defining value and characteristic of this industry, and one of the best ways to achieve that is through delegation. We try to make experiences easier for the user and for a token holder, and delegation is a great way to put your trust and put your utility of a token into somebody else who's been doing this full time.
Yeah.
I would also add, I think delegation in general, DAOs are facing problems of getting, competent folks involved in the day to day. And, if the goal obviously is to decentralize operations and move along that spectrum, you need to figure out ways to incentivize that type of participation. And so obviously delegation is a simple way to start to distribute power into the hands of folks who, one, are interested obviously in participating, have the competency to do it, and then empowering folks to find the right people to go in and perform the duties the DAO needs. And obviously it's just one critical piece of the overall puzzle. We need to create better ways to be incentivizing this actual behavior, incentivizing the right people to get involved. We're seeing the professionalization of delegates. So it's a means to an end, but it definitely doesn't solve all the issues, but it distributes power into the hands of people who, can ensure that the DAO is evolving the way it should. So it's critical.
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well. And even from a standpoint of governance aside from crypto, like we have this idea of representative governance, and then those select few, sometimes it's as small a set as one person is making the decisions on behalf of an entire population. And we've started to realize that decentralization is so important in both the technical and the non-technical aspects of coordinating people. So from what I've found is like a decentralized group of people makes better decisions. It's a better coordination system than a small set representing the entire population. And I think we're starting to see this in DAOs. Like as they become more complex, a contributor who has a technical background may not be the best person to make non-technical decisions. And then that's when they would delegate their voting power to a non-technical person in specific instances where they would vote on non-technical proposals. So I see it as like really important for the specialization in DAOs as they get more and more complex. So I'm also curious, like what kind of DAOs Tally is working with, and delegates, which ones you guys are working with, and then kind of why it would make sense to delegate to one delegate and not another. Does that make sense? So like Adrian, maybe you could give an example of the spectrum of DAOs that have delegated governance, and then Fig and Avi, I'm curious, like kind of what values Flipside represents as a delegate, and overall why someone would choose Flipside as their delegate.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a spectrum on Tally. I'd say, all the way from something like Arbitrum is a, L2 protocol. I think 400,000 holders, billions of dollars of assets. Like really, like that's on one side of the scale. And protocols are probably a focus. But there's also on the other side of the spectrum is something like Content Guild, which is just less than a dozen members, small treasury, and it's not a protocol. They're just a collective of people who are creating content, but they're fully on chain as far as how people get paid and how people request to get paid. So they create content for people in the Web3 space. So it's cool having a spectrum, but I'd say there definitely is a focus and around DAOs like let's say Arbitrum.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. We participate across all different ecosystems, EVM, so any network or protocol that involves a MetaMask, IBC and Cosmos and Solana as well. The reason why we play these places is to align with our data infrastructure. Flipside has invested deeply in on-chain data and helping people make decisions via that data. So we are in Arbitrum, we're in Optimism, we're in DYDX, we're in Aave. These are just a few on the EVM realm. In terms of values you should look for in a delegate, we think transparency and accountability is paramount. Actually understanding why people are making these decisions and how. For us, that's relying on this infrastructure that we've created through data, really showing the numbers and the reasons we're advocating for certain roles. I think simplicity and being a real human often gets lost within crypto. And at Flipside, we really try to represent that through all sorts of partnerships. Some other values I look at is where have they participated before? What unique experience or perspective are they offering? Those are just a few ways to think about how to diversify ownership and voting power across delegates.
Yeah, and Adrian, you showed us kind of the channel of communication that delegates can have with their token holders through the UI. There's mechanisms that kind of give token holders an alert if their delegate isn't active. How do you guys promote like very cohesive relationships between delegates and their constituents?
Yeah, I'd say it's still really early in that regard, and there's a huge opportunity to improve that. I think there's an opportunity to create more channels where delegates can check in, before a big proposal and say which way they're leaning, and then give an opportunity to their delegators to voice an opinion or ask questions and follow up, but create more of a dialogue. And I think there's just a huge opportunity right now. This UI that we displayed today is, it's super fresh and really in the early parts of tackling this opportunity.
Got it. Yeah. That's what I've seen is like a lot of times delegates, are very hyped up. Like Arbitrum and Optimism have this delegate profile right when they airdropped. I think you had to actually pick a delegate in order to claim the token. But then as their governance kind of evolved, a lot of those delegates dropped off the face of the earth. Like they just stopped participating in proposals, stopped voting. So like that's a real problem. I think voter participation in general is benefited by delegate democracy or delegate governance in general, because a lot of times these smaller token holders almost priced out of voting in important decisions. So they're able to now delegate, but if their delegate isn't active, that's a real issue. Avi Fig, what have you guys seen as far as like, you guys are coming in from the professional delegate angle. So how does the level of professionalism benefit you guys so that, I take it you guys are consistent in the votes and the proposals that you guys make? How does that separate you from some of the other types of delegates that are out there? Like we've seen university groups, kind of these other classes of delegates. What do you guys say is a specific characteristic of professional delegates?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to speak generally to like the process by which delegation is happening, as professional delegates, I think a lot of the differentiation in the work the work we do and the value we provide is day over day in these DAOs. It's being in the trenches and, you kind of put in the work and earn the trust of the community and then bring, a unique value add. So through analytics and data, we view the world through candid discussions and promoting, obviously like hearing all voices on issues and being open to communication and to talking to other delegates and community members. All that's key. I think as professional delegates, we do feel like we need to differentiate ourselves through bringing certain types of value or more team members to be able to contribute to the DAO, to be able to, not only provide frameworks and direction and guidance on proposals, but obviously to provide analytics and kind of data-driven decision making. And that obviously has an extra element. We've seen great student organizations also bringing really unique value adds too. They've been working towards some levels of professionalization. Sometimes they're hurt maybe by the turnover, but I think some of the best delegates out there are university clubs as well. And lots of folks have a lot to learn from them. In terms of what's happening now with delegation and how DAOs are rolling it out, there is a bit of an issue, and it's not because lack of trying. It's just really hard to resolve how to get tokens delegated to the right folks at in a scalable way, right? So you may be a really established delegate, but you end up below the fold in delegations when people are going and claiming their tokens, and you don't get as many delegations as a random person. And then that random person is in the top 20, and then they don't show up ever, right? And then it's like it's a tough way to balance. And so DAOs do need to figure out ways to incentivize redelegations. Like that's why delegation week is amazing, right? So we're subsidizing that. The amount of redelegations that happen in DAOs is minimal because people, one, either they don't care enough to go and do it, or it's too costly. And so we need to figure out ways to do that. Maker had a great model before they moved to Endgame, where your delegate contract would expire after a year. So that's forcing folks to either redelegate or you don't have power at all. And so I think setting time periods like that is an effective way to ensure the tokens either don't stay with delegates who are not doing anything, or obviously just forcing people to be a little more active in the DAO. So I think there are definitely more incentive structures and more mechanisms we could put in place in DAOs to help ensure that the right people who are actually carrying the DAO forward have the power that they deserve. So it's nuanced and we're so early, but it's critical to make sure that the responsible people who know the most about the DAO and care most end up with the decision-making power.
Yeah. I love how early it is because there's so much fertile ground to make innovation in this space. I've also seen like a slashing mechanism where if you're not participating in proposals as a delegate, your voting power gets slashed. And I think that is a real problem that we've seen as well, is like these delegates sometimes don't have a stake. There's no skin in the game for them. So when they drop off, they're not hurting themselves. They're just hurting their token holders. So yeah, coming up with like new and innovative ways to design incentive structures to promote kind of prosperous governance for the DAO, I think is really important, both from the off-chain perspective, which is kind of like Avi and Fig, what you guys do in the trenches, on discourse forums, a lot of off-chain proposals and voting and almost like just galvanizing the community for support on a specific issue. And then Adrian, Tally comes in from the on-chain perspective. So we have off-chain, on-chain. How can we, really facilitate like prosperous governance between on-chain and off-chain and bring the two together so that ultimately DAOs benefit? It's a general question just to anyone, not anyone in particular, but like it's almost like we have these two disconnected worlds right now when it comes to decentralized governance, the on-chain world and the off-chain world. What is Tally or what is Flipside doing to kind of bring those two worlds together?
Yeah, so I think what Tally's doing and is a good first start is building better tooling. The reason off-chain voting exists is to make it more accommodating, right? Like participating on chain is expensive. There's a gas cost, which is incurred. We've seen instances of DAOs which really merge these two worlds well. I would say Ava is one of them. And then we've seen other DAOs who totally neglect one or the other. Being able to see these discussions and understand the votes and having a clear framework of how to migrate from off-chain to on-chain to finalized and implemented is a really first important playbook for people getting involved.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll add, when I think of off-chain, what comes to mind is off-chain discussions, off-chain profiles, and off-chain voting and temperature checks. With off-chain profiles, so the delegate profiles that that we demoed earlier, that's off-chain, right? Because there is no standard yet for on-chain delegate profile, but that's something that we're working on with a few other tools in the space to create a standard for delegate profiles, so that can now be on-chain, that can be interoperable and shared across tools instead of siloed on our servers, for example. That's something that we're excited about. With off-chain voting, I think the L2 movement is huge for that, or because one of the biggest reasons why that temperature check happens, on off-chain is because it's cheaper. But once you bring down that price, maybe more of that voting will just happen on-chain, and that won't be such of a barrier. And with discussions, I'm not sure what opportunities are there for on-chain, but I think there's some opportunities around context, like being able to associate off-chain context with an on-chain proposal, just so that context can live on-chain and maybe that persists and it's easier to reference in the future. Yeah, that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah. The context is interesting because you can almost have suggested proposals or suggested discussions for certain proposals, depending on if you're going off-chain to on-chain or the other way around. So like overall voter participation, I think, there's lots of room to grow and there's lots of fertile ground to kind of make improvements there. You mentioned like some other issues, that are kind of facing delegation and decentralized governance right now. What are some of the solutions that you've seen kind of across the ecosystem? There's a lot of fragmented tools: Snapshot, Karma, Tally, Boardroom. Like, how do you guys use each of these tools to make the best decisions on behalf of the token holders?
Yeah, I mean, big ups to the Tally crew. I mean, I feel like they've done an amazing job of combining kind of like a market leading community building marketing element, where they really do get kind of the ethos and the evolution of DAOs and delegate work, and then supporting that with kind of like leading tooling that's helping round that out. And so there's other groups out there like Senate is building a really interesting tool, and the Karma folks trying to solve some of this. Obviously in terms of there's really difficult ways to Boardroom, also another great team that's building awesome tooling and giving insights into forums. Part of this kind of off-chain, on-chain discussion, and it's come up a bit in terms of incentivizing participation and compensation structures around DAOs. It's kind of been a hot thing for the level of work required of delegates, and then the compensation. There's a short time frame where people need to put up or shut up, in a sense. Like, if you want the value, then you need to start paying for it and viewing these people as providing that value. So there are ways to evaluate that. We could start creating tools, attestation tools, ways to bring in forum participation on Discourse or Commonwealth, and start to put some of that participation on chain and drive rewards from that. Like, there are creative ways we can start to combine these two worlds in order to start to evaluate like the participation levels of participants. But the Tally crew is definitely leading the charge and laying the foundation for the right tooling that DAOs and delegators need. So, and I love that it's all kind of combined in this one UI. It's replicating any voter for a representative wants a forum to track what their representative is doing and where their votes are going, and so I think it's a great experience.
Yeah, I love that too, because you could also start to track token holders, even if they don't have voting power delegated to them. You could kind of collect the contributions they've made in Discord or in Discourse, and then build a delegate profile before they even have voting power to them, and represent that on chain. So yeah, I'm really keen to see kind of these two worlds come together as blockchain scales, gas costs decrease, and more of this can live on chain. I think we'll have a more legitimate representation of DAOs, and better decisions made. I think the coordination mechanisms are getting better and better as we bring more stuff on chain. So we're starting to see like even more reputation and verifiable reputation brought, as far as who the contributors are to certain DAOs, who's making an impact, and when that impact is felt. So yeah, anything else you guys would like to add? This was a pleasure. I know I got a lot out of it, and I think I hope that anyone who's watching is also, benefiting from learning about delegated governance, as well as how to delegate, who to delegate to, and why. Anything you guys would like to add?
No, thanks very much for having us. This was awesome. Adrian, great work on the app and the demo. Robbie, thanks very much for having us. This is fun.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, this is great. Great to meet you guys. Thanks for having us. The only thing I'll add is to take a look at the delegationweek.com website. There's a bunch of information on who's participating and events that are happening next week, Twitter Spaces, some great discussions. So would recommend checking that out. But yeah, thanks for having us. This has been awesome.
Yeah, pleasure, guys. So I got the list of DAOs here that are subsidizing gas costs. We got Gitcoin, Uniswap, ENS, Arbitrum, Pool Together, and Hop is also doing some subsidies for specifically for smaller token holders. Flipside, you guys are delegates in any of those, in Arbitrum and also any of the other ones?
I didn't get all of the list quickly enough.
Sorry. So we've got Gitcoin, Uniswap, ENS, Arbitrum, and Pool Together.
Yeah, Arbitrum.
Nice. Cool, guys.
If you want to check us out too, you can head over to @Flipside Crypto. Keep up to date with what we're doing.
Sweet. This was a pleasure, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. See ya.